artificial harmonics, super fun to play. They appear in all sorts of fingerstyle and classical guitar repertoire, and Garth here has asked for some instruction on them. So here we are. This is 10 top tips and things to try for your artificial harmonics. First up, try the two main methods. But before we do that, we need to understand what an artificial harmonic actually is. And it's defined by a harmonic that's played with just your picking hand. Whereas a natural harmonic, you would use your fretting hand to lightly touch the desired harmonic over the fret and then pluck with your picking hand. In this instance, artificial harmonics, you do everything with your picking hand. So you'll lightly touch with your index finger where the harmonic will be, and then you pluck. And this is where we have our two methods. So the first I'll show you is the fact you can point with your index finger to where you want to voice the harmonic, for example, 12th fret at the first string, and you can use your thumb to pluck. So that's one method. And that's the shape you'll see my hand forming there. Index finger points and the thumb plucks the string behind. The other method is using your index finger to point and then another finger to pluck. I like using my ring finger for this. Some people use their middle finger. The reason I like to use my ring finger is because there's a greater separation between the point of contact and where you're actually plucking. So you can try that one. Same place, 12th fret of the first string, point of your index finger and then pluck with your ring finger. And that's the shape you'll see my hand in there. Pointing with the index finger and then plucking with the ring finger. And then you can take that and try it across all the strings and in different positions. So we could take that example of index finger and thumb plucking and move across all of the strings at the 12th fret. And then switch your method to the index finger and ring finger method and do the same. Now, once you're comfortable with that, you can then move to different positions where you find harmonics. And these will just be exactly the same as where you would normally find natural harmonics. And I have a whole video on natural harmonics if you're interested in checking that out. But let's move to another common position you'll find harmonics, and that's the 7th fret. And we can try both methods, index finger and thumb. And then switch to index finger and ring finger. We can move to 5th fret. And then switch. A little bit more fiddly down there, but you get the idea. So why is it important to be able to do both of these methods? Because they're kind of generating the same thing pretty much, aren't they? But the important thing here is they will allow you to do different things, as the video will come on to describe. So when you're using your index finger and thumb, for example, you'll notice that you have your ring finger available to do something else. But when you're using index finger and ring finger, you've freed up your thumb, and your thumb could do something else. So those are your two main methods of generating artificial harmonics. That's a really nice idea to get good at both of them. Number 2, keep your hand position consistent. So in the last part, I showed you the two main methods of generating artificial harmonics, but your chances of success with that will be greatly improved if you keep your hand position consistent. A key element of that is the role of your index finger. And there's a temptation when people first start with artificial harmonics to kind of bend the index finger as they're plucking. And obviously that can be problematic because you're kind of moving your goalposts as you're about to voice the harmonic, and really we're trying to aim for accuracy here. So the tip that I tend to give people is try and keep your index finger pretty straight. And the shape of my index finger and the kind of angle of it here is defined by the fact that I play with nails. So I can't really have the nail touching the string when I'm voicing this. It wants to be on the pad of the finger here. If you don't play with nails, you may be able to get more onto the tip of your finger. But regardless, the index finger should stay pretty straight and consistent as you pluck your harmonics. And then the whole hand shape from that wants to stay consistent. There's no excessive bending of fingers or moving of the wrist or bouncing away from the strings, and that's just going to help build consistency and success as you're playing these. So you can have a look as I play the artificial harmonics with the index finger and thumb method here. Minimal movement there across the board, and then let's switch to index finger and ring finger. You can see the position of my hand changes from method to method, but when I'm in each position, it remains nice and consistent. So when you're practicing these, see if you can pay attention to that and see if you can keep your hand position nice and consistent as you move between those different methods. On to number 3, and this is experiment with distance. And what I mean by that is the distance between where your index finger is voicing the harmonic and your thumb is, or your ring finger is, when you're actually plucking, because that can affect the tone of your harmonic. If you're very close together, you get quite a brittle, thin sounding harmonic. If you spread that distance between your index finger and your thumb, you get a slightly fuller, fatter sounding harmonic. And that can be quite a nice little detail to throw in if you want to. It's kind of the equivalent of when you're playing normally and you move your picking hand closer to the bridge to get like a ponticello sound. The equivalent of that with an artificial harmonic is bringing the distance between your index finger and your thumb or your ring finger closer together to get that really thin, brittle sound. And the same can happen with your index finger and ring finger method. Get them nice and close together. Get quite a delicate, brittle sound. Spread them out a little bit further apart. You get more depth and body. And that variation, I think, is quite a nice detail to be able to apply in certain situations. But generally speaking, you want to have a default distance, right? Something that you can just rely on consistently, and then you can vary it a little bit depending on what tone you like. But the default for me, if I'm at 12th fret, you know, I'm plucking around about the 15th or 16th fret with my index finger and thumb, and then the same with my index finger and ring finger. So there's about that much distance between. And that's nice because it allows me to bring it closer together if I want to get a thinner, more brittle sound, or spread further apart. If you're too close together as your default, then obviously there's not much room for maneuver there if you want to get more brittle. So you can experiment with that, the distance between your index finger and thumb and index finger and ring finger when you're actually plucking these artificial harmonics. Number 4, try tracing chords. So now that you have a firm grasp of these two different methods of how to play artificial harmonics, a good test of that is to take some humble, open position chord shapes and voice them with artificial harmonics. So let's take an example of an E major chord down here, and then we're going to trace it using artificial harmonics 12 frets above where the shape is. And I use the word trace because what I'm doing is kind of imagining this shape 12 frets higher, so that's going to guide me in terms of where the artificial harmonics need to be. So let's go through it. First of all, 6th string, it's open, so that means we have the 12th fret harmonic. Moving on to the 5th string, and we've got the 2nd fret down here, which means if we trace 12 frets above that, we end up with a 14th fret harmonic. That's the same on the 4th string. Then we move to the 3rd, where we have a 1st fret. That means we do a 13th fret artificial harmonic, and then we go into the open strings for 2 12 fret harmonics there. Once you've found those, you can just link it together. And you see the method I'm using there is index finger and thumb. And once you've done that, you can always switch to the other method and try that. Let's change the chord shape. Let's go to A major and do the same technique. Perhaps we'll move to D major next. Back to A major. Then E major. So you can pick any open position chord and then trace it up 12 frets, and that's a really nice thing to try. But then once you've got used to that, you could try tracing it in a slightly different harmonic position. So if we go to E major again, but this time instead of doing 12 frets higher, what if we just did 7 frets instead? So it would sound like this. And what we've actually produced there is not an E major chord, but actually a B major chord, which is kind of fun. Then we could also try maybe just 5 frets. This gets a bit fiddly, but it's good fun to try. And that voicing, you'll notice, is an octave higher than your 12th fret artificial harmonic voicing. So a really lovely way of putting your artificial harmonic techniques to the test is just pick some open position chord shapes and trace them in various positions with those harmonics up and down the neck. On to number 5, and this is try tracing scales. So we've done chords, let's now try some scales. And the exact same principle applies. You find a simple scale shape. Let's take an E major here. Once you've got that scale shape and can play it normally, then we try and trace that scale shape with artificial harmonics. And the ability here, for me, really is about being able to visualize what's happening down here with your fretting hand up here to allow you to easily find where your artificial harmonics need to be sounded. Obviously start nice and slow. So with this iteration of an E major scale, we start with the open first string. Then we're going to be fretting the 4th fret with your fretting hand, which means you trace up to find 16th fret here. Then we move down to the 2nd fret with your fretting hand, which means 14th fret for the harmonic. Then open, and then we move to the 14th fret artificial harmonic, then the 13th, 16th, and then back to 14th to finish. So take it really, really slowly, kind of visualize it, and if you can, the important thing to be looking at is your picking hand, because that's doing some fiddly movements here. If you can just rely on your fretting hand to kind of just know where it needs to go, that's really, really helpful, because you obviously can't look at both things twice. Let's go through that E major scale one more time. So there we go, tracing scales with artificial harmonics. And actually there's a chapter in my new book which talks about scales with harmonics. So a little bit of self-promotion there, shameless I know. But if you'd like to dig into it a little bit more in terms of scales and harmonics, then that digs into it a bit in the book. On to number 6, and this is try combining the index and ring finger method with some bass notes. So as I alluded to earlier in the video, the nice thing about these different methods is that they allow you to do some other things at the same time. So when we're using your index finger and ring finger method, the thumb is available. And what is the thumb good at? Well, the thumb is very good at playing bass notes. So a really nice thing to try is to try and play a bass note at the same time as playing a harmonic with your index finger and ring finger. It would sound something like this. So that's me plucking the open 4th string with my thumb and then doing the 12th fret 1st string harmonic with my index finger and ring finger. And that's quite nice because suddenly now we have an accompaniment to your harmonics. This is how this method is often used in guitar repertoire. Perhaps then we could start adding a little bit of melody around that. And maybe we could then change to the open 5th string. And then we can combine them. So that's quite a nice thing to try out, and it's just getting used to the technique of plucking with the thumb whilst playing the artificial harmonic. It takes a little bit of time to get right, but it will open up all sorts of possibilities, and as I said, it's used in lots of repertoire, so if it pops up in a piece that you're learning, you'll be like, ah, yeah, I know how to do that. One of my own pieces that uses this kind of technique is called Dragon's Back, and in the introduction to that piece, I'm using this index and ring finger method, and my thumb and middle finger are providing a melody that sits underneath the harmonics. It sounds a bit like this. So you can see it's not just limited to bass notes, you can do melodies, of course, as well across different strings. So it's a fun thing to try, and I'd certainly encourage you to do so. Number 7, and this is trying to combine the index and thumb method with normal notes provided by your ring finger. It's kind of the opposite of what we just looked at, really. Because when you're in this index and thumb method, you know, your ring finger is available to you. So how can you use that? Well, one option would be to do an artificial harmonic at the same time as playing a normal note with your ring finger. So you could try that. Open 3rd string, so the 12th fret harmonic there, and then plucking the open 1st string at the same time with your ring finger. It's quite pleasing. You could try it on different sets of strings. Then the other thing you could try is doing the artificial harmonic and then following it with a normal note, then back to the artificial harmonic and then another normal note in a repeating pattern. And that's where we get close to something called harp harmonics, which is a different thing. Again, I might even do a whole video on harp harmonics as they're quite fun. But this is how we get to them. We do an artificial harmonic using the index finger and thumb, and then we play with the ring finger a normal note in a repeating pattern. You can try that really simply with just open strings. So we can voice that 3rd string, 12th fret harmonic with the index finger and thumb, and then play with your ring finger after it. And then try repeating that. Once you get used to it, you could move to different sets of strings. So we could do 3rd string harmonic, open 1st, and then 4th string harmonic, open 2nd, and maybe repeat between those. Gradually increase the tempo as you get more confident with it, and I'll refer back to one of the earlier parts of this video. The consistency in your hand shape really helps here. Once you've done that, you can just open up to all the strings in a similar kind of way. And then once you get used to that, then we can add into the mix this idea of tracing chord shapes again, but using this kind of harp harmonic style method here. Really, really good fun to try. And I use this technique quite a lot in my own pieces. One example that comes to mind would be a tune of mine called The Wake Up. And it has a theme where I'm voicing this kind of C sharp minor 7 chord and then tracing it with this harp harmonic style technique. I'm adding in some colour with the hammer there as well, but it's really, really effective and such a beautiful texture and used in so many different styles of fingerstyle and classical music. So, well worth giving a try. Moving on to number 8, and this is combining artificial harmonics with natural harmonics. Why not? And a great example of this would be from an arrangement I've recently put together of Blue River Waltz by Jay Younger and Molly Mason. I wanted to voice the main melody of that piece with harmonics, and I needed to employ both artificial and natural at the same time in order to do so. So what you end up with is something that sounds like this. Which is really quite pleasing to play once you get the hang of it. But as you may see there, what I'm doing is I'm playing a bass note. I'm using that thumb to provide the bass, which is something that we've already discussed. We're doing some artificial harmonics, but then I'm coming along and also voicing some natural harmonics as well with the left hand and then plucking with the right hand. And that allows me to get everything that I need for the melody. So if you want to give this a try yourself, you could start nice and simple. For example, you could do the 12th fret 3rd string harmonic here with the index finger and thumb method, and then simultaneously voice the 7th fret harmonic with your fretting hand and then pluck with the ring finger and you get this. You could try that on different sets of strings. So it's kind of combining what we discussed in the previous part, but adding natural harmonics into the mix as well. And then you could use the idea of separating them instead of playing them simultaneously, so you get something like this. And that's just a really fun combination of natural and artificial harmonics together. On to number 9, and this is tri-harmonic drags. So what are those? This is the idea that you take one of these methods of playing artificial harmonics and you just drag it across multiple strings, maybe even all the strings in one go. So for example, we use the index finger and ring finger method here. And we start at the 12th fret of the first string, and we just try and drag that technique across all the strings and see if we get a harmonic each time. Kind of like that. It's really good fun. And the key to it really is, again, keeping that index finger nice and straight, and then with the ring finger, making sure it's dragging with the index finger, making sure they're working in sync. If they're out of sync, then you'll get just, open strings basically, like that. But if you bring them into sync and you drag backwards, you get a really nice sound out of that. We could also flip that and use the index and thumb method, and this might suit the opposite direction of drag. So it's really, really good fun. And, does this appear in much repertoire? I mean, I haven't seen it used a huge amount, but that's not to say it's not good fun. And actually, where I have seen it sometimes and where I've used it is not dragging across necessarily all of the strings, but maybe just small sets at once. Obviously, you don't have to do everything all at once, so you could just do a little set of 3 and that could be quite pleasing. And I've got situations and pieces of mine where I'll just try and get a little bit of a drag where I get like 2 strings at once, for example, in order to get like a harmony in the harmonics. So it's a nice technique to explore anyway, and really good fun, particularly as well in alternate tunings. And finally, number 10, try threading artificial harmonics into fingerstyle patterns. So first of all, let's find a fingerstyle pattern. So if we take an E minor chord here, I'll try a pattern that I rather like, something like this, for example. No artificial harmonics yet, but you might notice there could be a perfect place for them to fit, and that's when I'm playing the open first string and open second string in the pattern. So let's try making those into artificial harmonics instead. Super fun, right? Now that's one particular pattern which is fairly intricate, but let's see if we can simplify it even more. Let's take just a Travis picking style pattern. If I take a C major chord, for example, and did this pattern, which goes thumb, middle, thumb, index, we maybe borrow a melody from Dust in the Wind. Could we get artificial harmonics in amongst that, perhaps? Turns out we can, if we try hard enough. So anyway, it's a really nice way of employing these artificial harmonic techniques if you can start threading them into patterns that you already know. So there we have it. That was 10 top tips and things to try for your artificial harmonics. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learnt a thing or two. But I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. What did I miss? Have you got some great tips up your sleeve when it comes to artificial harmonics? Do let us know. And are there any other technical topics that you'd like me to dive into in this way for the acoustic guitar? Let me know down below. So that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Happy picking, and I'll catch you soon.